The people who will report on the progress or lack thereof during the legislative session are, of course, the women and men of the Capitol Press Corps. We continue our preview of the session now with NYF correspondent Gwyneth Dolan.
3, 2.
These are just three of the many people who will subject themselves to 30 days of lawmaking and deal-making just so you can have a better idea of what your government does on your behalf. From New Mexico in Depth, Executive Director and newspaper veteran Trip Jennings, Digital Editor for Searchlight New Mexico, Christian Marcus, and the Albuquerque Journal's Capitol Bureau Chief, Dan Boyd. Welcome, gentlemen. Thank you for being here today. Governor Michelle Lujan Grisham has a pocketbook stuffed full of cash from a record high amount of oil revenue coming in. On education, she wants to move to stage 2 of what she's calling her moonshot for public education. That includes raises for public school teachers, education employees, but also free college. Trip, what does her free college plan look like?
Well, she's really proposing a scholarship. This is to replace, and not replace, but in some way supplement the lottery scholarship that they took money from a few years ago. What this would do would actually kind of help thousands of students. There are some requirements that the students would have to make, but this is, she's thinking that we need a skilled, highly educated workforce, and this is what she's proposing.
It's like 55,000 students.
Yes, and it's $35 million that she's proposing. I know that lawmakers have a little bit of a different kind of view on this.
Dan, you've been up there in the Capitol. What do lawmakers want to do that's different?
Yeah, the Legislative Finance Committee has come out with its own budget recommendation, which has a similar dollar amount as the governor's recommendation, but it's kind of a different approach. It's spending that money, about the same, $35 million, on scholarships, but kind of targeting them more and making them more for maybe low-income students and not just kind of all New Mexicans, getting basically free college if you qualify.
What do you guys think is going to happen there?
I think it's hard to tell on that one. I think that's one that something will probably happen, and I think there will be more attention paid to higher education. Last year was really focused on K through 12. But whether the governor kind of gets this specific plan that she's unveiled, I think kind of time will tell on that.
You're going to have a push from those folks on the left who are talking about like what equity of scholarship, and those on right. I don't mean to be so simplistic about it, but that's going to be part of the cross currents here. Mm-hmm. And so I'm with Dan. It's going to be interesting to see what happens.
We got cross currents too on early childhood education. She wants an early childhood trust fund with slightly higher price tag, $320 million, one-time appropriation to go in and then spend the interest on that on early childhood.
It is that. There's also kind of a mechanism that they're proposing, like in the out years, that if there's so much invested in the reserves, they hit a point, they start pumping money into this trust fund, and they hope to have $1 billion over 3 years that would produce $40 to $50 million a year to pay for early childhood programs, visiting and stuff like that.
And again, the LFC is on a different page.
I think the LFC actually, could be on board with this one. Senator John Arthur Smith is a co-sponsor of this trust fund bill. There still is a separate proposal that's been around to increase the distribution amount from the land grant permanent fund.
Right.
And so that'll be on the table as well.
But that has been, that's been shot down every year for.
Yeah, and that's had a hard time ever getting through the Senate. So I've learned not to predict anything at the legislature, but I think this early childhood trust fund, from what I've heard, is getting a pretty positive reception.
Everybody is, yeah.
Speaking of money, in the economy, the governor has agreed to put on the agenda the legalization of cannabis. This has been going through a working group in the interim. They're looking at it as a potential windfall for the state and a way to diversify the economy. It's also probably the most exciting tax plan we're going to talk about ever. So, Dan, what does this year's proposal look like?
So this year's proposal, there was a working group that the Governor Lujan Grisham created to kind of come up with, study other states and look at previous bills. And so they've come up with this huge, long bill, basic details. It would be about a 17% tax rate. It would use some of the money, would go to kind of supplement and subsidize the medical cannabis program. It would also go into law enforcement, DWI, training, things like that. But I think it's, there's going to be pushback, and if anyone is just seeing this as a moneymaker, I think it's much more complicated than that.
Well, we've been looking at these proposals for several years. Nobody can be sure how much money this could possibly bring in, right? One of the sticking points we've talked about before is whether counties can opt out, because not everybody's super on board here. But what does this plan say about that?
Yeah, under this current recommendation, we'll see how the bill evolves, but counties would not be able to opt out. They would be able to set some limits about where these dispensaries could be located and things like that, but it would be different. Like the Colorado model, some counties have opted out, and under this plan, they would not be able to do that.
Christian, if this passes, what should we do with this money?
You know, at Searchlight, we're really going to be concerned with how that money is going to be spent. In Colorado, we saw a really good model and saw a lot of investment in education, in early childhood, and in public safety, like Dan has talked about. It's already in the bill. So we'll be watching closely as it develops to see exactly where that money will be going.
Because we're not really talking about that right now.
Right, exactly. And so we've yet to see kind of how that will play out. So we'll be sitting and watching closely.
That's like free money, woo! There's also a bipartisan plan to fix the state employees' pension fund. That's going to be easy, right?
I was just telling Dan that one of the first stories I covered when I got to New Mexico was reforming PARA. This is back 15 years ago. So, you know, it's not an easy fix.
It doesn't have enough money to pay for all the state employees who are retiring. And that's a big problem, right? So what are they trying to do here?
They're trying to make, several changes, kind of reducing the COLA, which is the cost of living adjustment that retirees get every year. That's the really controversial part. A lot of retirees kind of are not on board with that idea. So I think this will be kind of a tough politically to push this forward. But like you said, I think there's the concern that the longer you wait on this issue, the bigger problem it's going to be. Right now, PARA is not at risk of not being able to pay retirees, but if, 20, 30 years down the road, it could be a pretty serious situation.
And this would make it solvent in 25 years from now, right?
That's the projection. I mean, as Tripp mentioned, there's been previous solvency or pension fixes that they thought were going to be 100% funded, and that hasn't materialized. So there's a lot of variables too. I mean, the stock market, the investments, things like that.
This is a powerful lobby.
And well, I was about to say, and if you think about this, our two legislative leaders, at least the House Speaker and the Senate Majority Leader, they're in the district probably with the most retirees.
Santa Fe.
So, I mean, there's some very powerful lobby. There's the politics. There's the economy.
That's a good point, Tripp.
Yeah. I mean, there's, and they're aware of that.
Yeah.
Peter Worth and Brian Eagle.
So the pressure is on legislative leaders to do right by the folks who live in their district who've been working for state government.
And yes, and at the same time, this is a rule that came down like last decade from the general accounting. There's some needs on all ends here, trying to get funded, yeah.
Public safety. The governor approved kind of a long list of public safety issues. Christian, one of them is about human trafficking. Searchlight has done some devastating reporting on this topic here. What does Lujan Grisham want to change here?
So it looks like the governor is primarily trying to address expanding the definition of what human trafficking is, and also looking at increasing the penalties for charges associated with that, especially with an individual that's under the age of 16. The story that you're referring to is actually somebody that was under the age of 16, and it actually highlighted another issue that I don't think the governor is addressing here, and that is this young woman. She encountered dozens of health care facilities, sheriff's office, police departments in three different municipalities, and none of them screened her for human trafficking or abuse.
And they weren't talking to each other. She had so many interactions with people who could have made a difference, and nothing happened. So, the governor's been talking about getting these agencies to work better together, but the story made it sound like it's not happening.
Right, exactly. And so that was part of the story, was we are the ones that drew the lines in between those things and kind of put the story together, and where the organizations that are supposed to identify those people, they completely missed it.
And I want to put another plug for that story because it made me cry. It was so good. Expanding the definition of human trafficking is exactly what that story is about. All right, red flag laws. Let's talk about guns. The governor wants to sign a proposal to take guns away from dangerous people. Dan, how does this work?
This is a controversial one. It's going to be tough sledding. They also proposed it last year and passed the House and died in a Senate committee. Basically, it would allow, if you go to a judge and he gives an order, that you could temporarily seize firearms from an individual who's deemed to be either a threat to themselves or to others.
And, we've done several shows about this here on New Mexico in Focus before. We've talked with domestic violence advocates about how frequently guns are used in the home against family members. And we've talked to suicide awareness folks about how important it is to take that away when someone is talking about that really audibly. But I want to make sure we mention one more time, you have to get a court order.
You have to get a court order, and I think there is a lot of pushback from most sheriffs on this issue. I think there's concerns about due process, or this being used kind of for political reasons. Colorado just approved a law, and they're already running into some legal issues with that. So, I think a lot of states have moved toward this model in recent years, especially with the school shootings, as a way to try to get guns out of certain people's hands. But it is, legally and kind of practically complicated.
Yes, that's a really good way to put that. Let's talk about the environment. Lujan Grisham and Democrats want to continue their push for clean energy this session. They are pushing Christian to reform the Public Regulation Commission that regulates utilities and energy and a lot of stuff like that. What does the PRC need reform?
I think that a lot of people think that maybe it does. We kind of got a great example of this dysfunction and how that's kind of impeding the governor's agenda when it comes to the clean energy transition. Last summer, when it comes to the closure of the P&M plant in San Juan County, my home county actually, infighting on the panel and disagreements kind of jeopardized that transition plan and left us in a position where we still don't know where P&M is at on the energy transition. So I think that was an excellent example of just exactly what happens at the PRC.
Tripp, I know that you have watched along with the rest of us as the legislature has tried over the years to reform this public body. They are elected from all over the state. And they really don't have to have too many qualifications at this point.
They do not, and it's important to say that the PRC itself is a reformed agency. It was something else before, and this is a difficult job to have because they are actually looking over not only its health care, it's in deep, profound environmental regulations. And, in the past, I remember someone that Susana Martinez, the predecessor appointed, actually had deep understanding of oil and gas around the world and how it affected and was really good. But, he didn't survive.
Yeah. She also is proposing to bring back the solar tax credit and add an electric vehicle credit. There's also a plan to make it easier to build transmission lines for renewable energy, which has been a big, big sticking point. But big picture here, in terms of this session, this is supposed to be about the budget. This is supposed to be about money. There is a big debate happening over, how we spend this windfall of money and whether we should spend how much of it. What's this look like?
Well, I think, the State of Commerce came out and said that there's $800 million more this year they have to work with than last year. People hear the phrase $800 million. Well, there are a lot of needs. There's roads, there's state agencies that need to be filled. There's education, and the Transform Education folks and advocates and the plaintiffs and the Yazzie Martinez are pushing to spend possibly all of that money on education. And so there's also a conversation about, do we need more revenue? Do we need to actually tax the wealthiest? Do we need to reform the personal income tax that Governor Bill Richardson changed in 2003? Mm-hmm. So that's a very complicated, very large conversation.
And this is we have a long history of these conversations about, no, we should save it, no, we should spend it, we have it now.
How much to go in the reserves?
Yeah,
and I think with the reserves, fascinating. Even 10 years ago, it was usually a 10% target, and now we've become so reliant on oil and gas, they're talking about 25% reserves.
Yeah.
Partly it's because they got reduced on their bond rating.
Lightning round. Let's talk about what the governor did not put on the agenda. Christian Searchlight has been reporting on some education issues that you were expecting to come up. They're not on the call now, but they could be.
Right, yes. Searchlight published a devastating story last year about the use of restraint seclusion in classrooms across New Mexico. Under current federal guidelines, schools are supposed to report those instances. We found that schools are not reporting them and not even reporting them to parents. Now, the governor has addressed this story, saying that she wanted to address this issue with the policy changes at the New Mexico Public Education Department first, but it's not too late for it to be added to the call.
10 seconds, Dan.
For me, I think tax reform, that's an interesting one. The governor said she'd rather wait till next year to the 60-day session to take a bite at that, and specifically trying to overhaul the gross receipts tax rate and lower the base rate, get rid of some exemptions.
Transparency.
We don't know how lawmakers spend their money on capital outlay stuff around the state. We did a big story actually getting lawmakers, 97 lawmakers to give us that information, but there's no law or rule. Now is the thing. Also, Ethics Commission.
Funding for the Ethics
Funding
Commission.
for Ethics Commission, and yeah.
That's great. Gentlemen, thank you so much for being with us today and talking about this stuff. We will see you up at the Capitol.